What's going on, everyone? Jim here with the Flying Midwest podcast. Before we get into this episode, just want to make a quick correction to our last episode. In our last episode, we spoke with Ken Chase, who we incorrectly identified as a retired airline captain. Though he has got vast years of experience, he wanted us to make the correction that he is not in fact a retired airline captain, but rather he served as a captain in the United States Air Force. Ken is a man of great integrity, and he did not want to misrepresent himself to our audience. So for that, we apologize to him for the error, and we thank him for the great content he was able to help us provide to our audience all the same. And now, Episode 5 of the Flying Midwest podcast.
Crystal Tower Information Whiskey 21530 Zulu, wind 060 at 5.
076 Mike Juliet, this is departure radar contact.
Service weather information from Minnesota available on flight service frequency.
You've dialed in the Flying Midwest podcast, connecting aviators from across America's heartland, sharing news, information, and events from around the region.
Calling Nancy 53 on Overtire, Roger, turn left heading 070, runway 9er, clear for takeoff.
Sit back, relax, and join our crew for some hangar talk as we discuss a wide variety of regional aviation topics.
Departure 71143, flying 5, runway 28 left, quick takeoff, left hand southwest.
And now, from our home at the Anoka County Blaine Airport, our checklist is complete, and we're ready for departure for another episode of the Flying Midwest podcast.
Contact departure of your flight.
Hello, everyone. Jim here with the Flying Midwest podcast. So happy you're able to join us. On this episode, we talk about emergency situations. We speak with private pilot, author, and voiceover artist Lion Templin about his experiences with emergency-type situations. And as always, news, events, and information from around the region, with some friendly hangar talk along the way. So strap in and let's take off into this episode of the Flying Midwest podcast.
Hey guys.
Greetings.
How is everybody?
Good.
Can't complain, really.
It's freezing down here in Texas, whereas yesterday it was like 80 degrees.
I heard you didn't come prepared for the weather.
No, I did not.
Little birdie told me.
Yeah, I didn't leave Minnesota with a winter coat, but I did with a nice heavy Eddie Bauer sweater, which actually came in very handy tonight.
In Texas, isn't that basically a coat, though?
This is like a heavy down winter coat
For a Minnesotan in Texas.
Yeah, in the South, people like wear heavy coats when it's like 60 because, yes.
For the record, it's 29 degrees outside right now.
That is pretty cold for a state that doesn't usually get that cold.
More southern Texas.
Well, when I lived in Nevada for, 3.5, 4 years, when it was 50 or 60 degrees, like when you're so used to it being like 1,000 degrees all summer long, 50 or 60 is pretty cold. Even me with that Minnesotan blood, I threw on a heavier coat when it's 50 or 60 just because I wasn't used to it anymore. Yeah,
I lived in Florida, same thing. I mean, I didn't wear a coat, but I definitely, even if it got to like 70 or 65, God forbid, I wore, pants and a sweatshirt because it's like the only time you can get away with wearing a sweatshirt down there unless you want to roast like a little piglet.
So since our last episode, Trevor has had more fun and exciting aviation-related experiences down at Lackland Air Force Base.
Yeah, no kid. So I'll preface this. The FAA does this. I think it's in Oklahoma that they do it. If you get an opportunity to go to an altitude chamber, I highly, highly recommend it. Basically, what it's going through is you have a class, so you sit through an academic class, and it'll give you the aviation physiology symptoms of hypoxia. If you're a tobacco user, what kind of altitude does your body really start dealing with the hypoxic symptoms? And then eventually it'll teach you, you'll actually go into an altitude chamber and feel hypoxia, like you get to know your individual symptoms. And then you actually get to do a rapid decompression simulation. So I actually got to do both of them for the Air Force as part of my new career field. And I did not know what to expect. And, hypoxia is deadly. I mean, I think we can all agree with that, especially if you've spent a minute in aviation. When you get up to high altitude, it does become a thing. Payne Stewart was a real thing. knowing your symptoms, and it's going to be different from everybody else. You could get 2 or 3 before your time of useful consciousness is up, which is actually a thing that nobody really talks about in the civilian world. So I went up to the altitude chamber, and they give us these little worksheets, like in series, like 2, 4, 6, 8. What's after that? It's like 10, 12, all the way so on, whatnot. But you can really start telling after you get up to I think we're up to 25,000 feet of cabin altitude, and you can start seeing where your mental deterioration starts going sideways. So for me, you're up at altitude, you're able to inhale and exhale like you normally would, but your body's starving of oxygen. So that was actually kind of eye-opening to me, because I always thought that the higher you get, it's kind of like a vacuum that you just can't suck the air into your lungs, but your lungs actually do inflate like they normally do. So, within, I think your time of useful consciousness at that time was 3 to 5 minutes at 25,000 feet. After 30 seconds or so, 30 to 60 seconds, you start getting, for me, it was like tingliness, started definitely getting euphoria, started getting mental confusion. And then when you start getting the dizziness, that was my aha moment. I got to put on oxygen. And it was, I lasted maybe 115 seconds. So like I said, I highly recommend, if anybody gets an opportunity to go to an altitude chamber, either through the FAA or through the Air Force, through an aircrew position, do it. It will save your life.
I think what you mentioned is really important for why this is so dangerous, because like you're saying, I mean, if you don't know any better, you're breathing normally in your mind, but you're not taking in as much oxygen. A lot of people do report that euphoria is a common symptom. So if you're up at, 12,000 feet for a really long time, and you start kind of being euphoric and goofing around with your buddy in the airplane, you may not notice that you're actually becoming hypoxic.
Right, and that's one of the big things that we take away from this academics is that, 12,000 feet. We all know the regulation. If you're going to have a duration more than 30 minutes at that altitude, then the pilot has to be on oxygen. But let's add medications. Okay, you have a list of approved medications for the FAA, and maybe you're taking an unauthorized medication, or maybe you're a tobacco user, something to that effect. All of a sudden, at 5,000 feet, maybe your lungs are operating as if it's at 12 or 13,000 feet. So you go up to 12, 13,000 feet. You're up at 18,000 feet for your lung capacity. So you have a lot of things that are at play, physiologically speaking. So it was really a great thing, great training. I highly recommend it. Invest the money, especially if you're going to do high altitude flight.
Very cool experience. And I think that as you continue through your flight engineer training, we look forward to hearing more of those stories from you and sharing those with our audience. So thanks for that, Trevor.
That's a super awesome experience you had, Trevor. And that actually ties in super well to the topic of this week's episode. We are actually talking about emergencies this week, and we are going to talk about that in a little bit with our guest for this week. But for now, let's talk about some news.
So back in January, we talked about the FAA's deal with 5G and the NOTAMs and all that sort of stuff. Well, February 23rd, the FAA actually came out with another statement that basically says that the FAA has issued a new airworthiness directive revising the landing requirements for certain aircraft, the 737 to be specific, at airports where 5G interference could occur. The FAA says that the AD does not apply to landings at airports where FAA has determined aircraft radio altimeters are safe and reliable in the 5G C-band environment. It also does not apply to airports where 5G is not deployed. Now, there's a lot of places in the country where 5G is employed. There's also a lot of places in the country where 5G is not. Minneapolis is one of those places where it is deployed. The FAA goes out and saying that the FAA issued the AD because the many of the systems that the 737 relies on for the altimeter, the radio altimeter, it includes systems like your auto throttles, your ground proximity warning system, your JIPWIS. Now, the AD affects approximately 2,400 aircraft in the United States and about 8,300 aircraft worldwide, and it's effective immediately. That's kind of a big update that we wanted to bring back to you guys, a little bit update on the C-band fiasco that's going on with 5G.
So switching gears, we're going to talk about Textron. If you're a fan of Cessna, you might like to hear that the Turbo Skylane is coming into production again after a 9-year hiatus. Textron is taking orders, and they should start to deliver the new $653,000 aircraft in early 2023. So this new and improved Turbo Skylane will feature upgrades like the Garmin G1000 NXI, a 3-bay Macaulay prop, it's heated, which is super nice, and an in-cabin oxygen system. It can go up really high, it does all the turbocharged things, and it seems like a really capable aircraft. So it's cool that they're gonna bring that back, and this will be produced in Independence, Kansas. Also having to do with Textron and Cessna, as of the 15th of February, Textron announced that the 8,000th Cessna Citation has been delivered to Scott's Miracle-Gro, which is a huge milestone for the company. The Citation has been in production for a multitude of years, and it is one of the most popular business jets in the world. This is a significant milestone for the company, and we look forward to see what they have in store for us in the future.
A Nebraska Army National Guard helicopter crew assisted with an aircraft in distress in the Lincoln, Nebraska area on February 10th. The aircraft was returning from a nighttime training flight when it had overheard on air traffic control frequencies that the aircraft was in distress. The pilot of the small aircraft had lost an engine and had to land on a field in the area. Having heard the distress call, CW3 Russell Coleman, who's the pilot of the aircraft, responded to the area with his air crew. He's quoted as saying, "We are medevac aircraft with night vision equipment, so we were in a position to help in several ways, by locating the aircraft on the ground, bringing our paramedic, and relaying the exact location to first responders." The crew was able to locate the aircraft in a cornfield just east of Lincoln, Nebraska. They noted the aircraft was not far from its last known radar location and had deployed its parachute system. Nebraska state troopers and ground ambulance crews arrived shortly thereafter, and the crew was able to return back to their Army Aviation support facility at the Lincoln Airport.
So moving to the northern tier of our region, Moorhead Municipal Airport is going to have a name change. Wednesday, February 23rd, the Moorhead Airport Committee unanimously approved the recommendation for changing its name from Moorhead Municipal Airport to the Moorhead Municipal Airport Florence Treetops Klingensmith Field. The recommendation will now go to the City Council for approval. A couple quick highlights for Klingensmith. She grew up in Moorhead and became North Dakota's first licensed pilot. She started an aviation career back in 1929 after watching Charles Lindbergh land at Hecker Field in Fargo. Following the year, she went on to skydive before becoming a first licensed female pilot in North Dakota. She was known for nationwide flying stunts, winning air races against male pilots. An airplane malfunction is believed to have caused a fatal crash that ended her life back at the age of 28.
All right, we are going over to Indiana State University now. There is a new scholarship for minority students who are looking to be in their aviation program. This scholarship is actually in honor of former Tuskegee Airman Quentin P. Smith, Sr. He is actually an alumnus of the university and isn't yet celebrated at the university itself. A little bit about Smith. He was a first lieutenant in the Army Air Forces during World War II. He was briefly stationed at Freeman Field in Seymour, and he was one of 101 Tuskegee Airmen who were actually arrested for refusing to acknowledge the base's segregated officers' clubs for Black and white officers. This was known later as the Freeman Field Mutiny. It was actually one of the first instances of Black Americans using civil disobedience to secure civil rights. It was actually credited with being a major factor in President Harry Truman's decision to desegregate the military in 1948. A trustee of the university donated $150,000 to start the Quentin P. Smith Sr. Endowed Aviation Scholarship, and this aims to increase aviation opportunities for minority students at the university. The school is also renaming the observation deck at its flight academy in honor of Smith.
Well, that was the news. Let's hop over to Jim for some events and this day in aviation history.
Coming up in just about a week on Saturday, March 5th from 10 to 3 p.m., Iceport 2022, where aviators can fly into Lake Mille Lacs at Max Twin Bay and land on their plowed-in runway on the lake. There's a distinct possibility that Maddie and I may be on our way up there to join in the festivities, so we hope to see some of you there. More information is available on facebook.com/createlift. On Saturday, March 12th, 2022, from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m., there'll be a chili fly-in at the West Metro Hangar at the Buffalo, Minnesota Airport. The event will be $7 per bowl of chili and $2 for beverages. Funds will go towards supporting Aviation Education Center. On Saturday, May 14th, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Benton, Illinois Airport, they're hosting their second Saturday food truck fly-in and cruise-in. Planes, cars, trucks, and motorcycles are all welcomed at the event. They'll have food trucks set up, a raffle, and winners must be present to win. There will be a no-go or go decision for weather made the day prior to the event, and announcements will be available on Facebook at the Benton Municipal Airport. In our last episode, we highlighted some air shows coming to your area. This episode, we want to talk about the United States Air Force Thunderbirds and United States Navy Blue Angels schedule throughout the Midwest. Beginning with the Thunderbirds, On June 4th and 5th, they will be at the Fort Wayne Open House Air Show in Fort Wayne, Indiana. June 18th and 19th at the Grand Forks Air Force Base Air Show in Grand Forks, North Dakota. July 2nd and 3rd at the Battle Creek Air Show and Balloon Festival in Battle Creek, Michigan. July 16th and 17th at the Duluth Air and Aviation Expo in Duluth, Minnesota. September 3rd and 4th at the KC Air Show in New Century, Kansas. And finally, September 24th and 25th at the Frontiers in Flight Open House and Air Show in McConnell Air Force Base in Wichita, Kansas. On to the Blue Angels. Their show season in the Midwest begins on May 14th and 15th, where they'll perform at Ellsworth Air Force Base at their open house. June 4th and 5th at the Chippewa Valley Air Show in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. July 2nd and 3rd at the National Cherry Festival Air Show in Traverse City, Michigan. July 16th and 17th at the Thunder Over Michigan Air Show in Ypsilanti, Michigan. July 23rd and 24th at the Milwaukee Air and Water Show in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And finally, August 20th and 21st, the Chicago Air and Water Show in Chicago, Illinois. And for this episode, for our aviation history, February 3rd marks the anniversary of the day the music died. February 3rd, 1959. Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper were killed when the aircraft that they were in crashed in Iowa shortly after takeoff from Mason City. That flight was en route to perform a show in Moorhead, Minnesota.
Hey, Trevor, have you ever had any in-flight emergencies?
Judging by this week's content, I would say there are times that I've actually had some what I would consider in-flight emergencies. Now, one thing that we really want to get to the crux of is we're not just looking at engine fires. We're not looking at the airplane coming apart around us. There's different levels of emergencies. You know, if you're a private pilot, VFR pilot going into IMC, that is an emergency. I've been a statistic on that. I was a VFR pilot, went into IMC. What about you, Maddie?
Honestly, I think I have 400 hours now. In that amount of time, I've gone through several ratings, and I still have not had what I would constitute as a true emergency. I have been in a few situations where I've had some close calls, and I've had some events where, you know, if I wasn't on a training flight and I didn't have a safety net or something like that, it would have definitely been an emergency. Like one time I was on a training flight, I was in IMC and doing an approach. It was an RNAV approach, and I lost GPS because it was actually intermittent. It was a genuine failure. And I had to test like, oh, what do I actually do in this situation? Because even going missed, it's like, oh, how am I going to do my hold? I don't know. I don't have GPS. So it was definitely that I remember being a challenge, but I had my CFI with me. So at that time, although I didn't know what to do, I had that learning experience. But it definitely goes to show how, depending on your experience level and what kind of situation you're in, everything's always in flux with aviation, and you determine as the pilot what's an emergency. And by the FARs, you are able to do whatever you need to do in order to make sure that flight ends successfully.
We've got a good gentleman that's on the podcast this episode, Lion, and I'll hand it off to Jim to go and introduce Lion.
So I'm really excited to welcome Lion Templin to our episode. Lion is a close personal friend of mine, an accomplished pilot, a Civil Air Patrol mission pilot, and frankly, the person who got me into general aviation and seeking my own pilot certificates and adventures in aviation. Lion has had a number of experiences in his aviation career that's kind of tested his mettle of what he's made of as a pilot and gained him a lot of experience that he's been able to share with others in telling his story. So that's kind of the purpose of bringing him on this episode. Lion is also an author who has written books on working in the corporate environment, as well as a business consultant. And he does voiceover work, which you have all heard in the intro and outro of these episodes, as Lion is our guy who tells you good day at the end of the episode. So really excited to have him here. So let's welcome Lion Templin. So to start, Lion, you want to give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Thanks a lot for having me on, guys. This is fantastic. I'm really excited to be here. As Jim said, I've been flying for a while, both kind of for myself, for Civil Air Patrol as well, just single engine stuff. I think the big thing about my background in terms of flying is that I got a lesson early on from one of my mentors about, you know, you can have 1,000 hours, but you can have 1,000 hours of the same 1 hour 1,000 times, or you can have 1,000 hours of doing different things. And, you know, one of those has, you know, better experience than the other one. And so I kind of took to heart that whole idea of, hey, I should have a whole bunch of different experiences and whatnot to round myself out as a pilot. So I kind of took to throwing myself to, kind of different things early on. And it's been an exciting time in the air, for certain. Harrowing at times, but exciting.
In today's training world, especially the kids who are getting trained up and immediately going to the airlines, a lot of it's just, hey, you just got to rack up your hours. So they do a lot of that same 1 hour 1,000 times. And that's really, it's kind of discouraging in a way, but at the same time, I'm glad there are people like you out there who have that determination to do that rounding out of your aviation career and making yourself a better pilot that way.
This goes back to something that you've said a number of times now, Maddie, on the podcast about we don't rise to the occasion, we sink to our highest level of experience. And I think that Lion has kind of embodied that in his aviation career, not just in, that principle, but just in trying to get those different experiences to round out his training.
I think, though, that, I kind of started down this road even during my primary training, because I kind of looked at, hey, what is the hard stuff and what is the stuff most people don't want to do? And I just kind of picked out a couple things that I thought, hey, this is something that would be really important to have. So when it got really awful crosswind gusty days, I'm up there with my instructor hammering out the really difficult landings, because I know a whole bunch of guys that, if the wind's up, they're not flying. And I thought that was going to be kind of a liability. So I definitely want to be there for the really, really tough landings to practice that stuff, because there have been times I've needed it.
And having been on air crews with you in Civil Air Patrol, I can say that I'm definitely one of the benefactors of that training experience. Is when we did those missions in Duluth a number of years ago, we had some nasty crosswind landings that we did. And the joke amongst not only ourselves, but the other aircrew pilots was every time you come back from a mission, you're current for another 90 days because you bounced a landing 3 times.
I kind of have my own kind of internal joke about this. I call them dangerous amusement park rides. When the airplane is unstable in all 3 axes, that's a dangerous amusement park ride. And that's where it gets entertaining. At a landing, I took a friend, $100 hamburger thing. And he's not a pilot, but he's into flying and whatnot. And we're coming back at night, and the wind has kicked up real bad. And so I'm coming into Anoka. I'm fighting the wind the entire way. The aircraft is bouncing around like crazy. And we all know these kinds of landings, but this guy doesn't know these kinds of landings. So he's over there like practically praying as I'm like setting it down on the runway carefully, fighting through all the wind and whatnot. And the moment I get it down, he's like, oh, thank God, we finally made it. I'm like, let's do that again. Sadly, he didn't want to. So,
it wasn't game, huh?
No. we made that with a full stop.
Yeah, I bet.
I think it's kind of unique. So my big wind experience was back when I had my Cherokee 180. I love that airplane. That airplane would fly through just about anything. So anyway, it was a Memorial Day weekend. I can't remember what year it was. It wasn't the 103-degree day, but I was flying with my wife down to Mankato to have, a Memorial Day kind of dinner, burger burn, whatever. So the winds were gusting up to 30, 35 knots or something like that. I'm like looking at the TAF, and it's like, oh, the winds are going to start dying down. Let's go to the airport. It's going to go within my personal limitations. And, so all of a sudden I get on the ATIS. ATIS is calling, gusting 20 within my personal limitations. So let's go. Well, the winds kick up right there. And I was off before the first or second taxiway off the parallel. And then all of a sudden I'm like, crap, I'm going to have to land this thing. We're getting into Mankato. I'm like, we're committed at this point. We just go wait it out. Go let the sweat, radiate off the hands, let re-gear, retool. And I ended up making a beautiful landing down in Mankato. And then coming back, we got nose to nose with a thunderstorm. And, it's like, this is kind of an interesting experience. And I had probably one of my best 2 landings, including a diversion until we hit wind shear and whatnot. So I go, we're going over to Lakeville, because I was watching storms and all that stuff. It's like my best landings in my entire career are when it's adversity. So that's pretty awesome.
Lion, how about you tell us about how you got into aviation?
When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time in northwestern Ontario, and my father took me up there, and we would take bush planes into the backcountry. And so, as a kid, you're sitting there in that right seat of de Havilland beaver flying around over the trees and through all the stuff. And that was really impressive to me at the time. But there was a moment in all of that kind of stood out and said, oh, wow, that's cool. We're stuck out there, we're waiting for a pickup. It's really low clouds, and we have no idea if we're going to get out. And of course, this is a bush pilot. We're going to get out. But I didn't know that as a kid, right? So out of nowhere, we suddenly hear that big radial engine grinding in. Those beavers, they fly like 5 knots basically, grind in straight over the top of us, just at the top of the trees, and set it down in the lake. And the clouds are just above that. So he gets it in here, and we load up our canoe and load up our gear and whatnot, and I get to sit again in the right seat. And I watch this guy as he takes off into this thick mush of clouds and whatnot. And he is following like a little bit of like creeks and whatnot through the trees and whatnot, just right above tree level, working his way, trying to figure out, okay, if I head south a bunch, I'll hit a railroad track, and then I'll turn on that railroad track and head back towards a road, and then take that road back up to the base. And it was a moment of, wow, this is impressive. Like, I think I should have been scared, but it was just incredible to watch, this guy understanding his terrain and understanding his aircraft and all that kind of stuff. It just kind of crystallized that, hey, this is really cool. Later on in life, I remember watching on television the Gulf War, and I remember a moment where news came by that there was a crew shot down in a Black Hawk, and it was kind of like, oh, wow, flying is really dangerous. You know what? I can do that. And so relatively soon after that, I went to the local recruiters and said, what do I need to do to fly helicopters for the Army? And I went through a long process all the way up to tests and whatnot. And I eventually, unfortunately, medicaled out. But along that path was this whole idea of, flying is kind of a dangerous thing, and it kind of takes a bit of nerve to do it. Turned up with me in Civil Air Patrol, and I realized, hey, cool, as I'm flying around just doing equipment exchanges with my mentor, she was an excellent pilot, that, hey, wait a minute, I can do this myself, like I can get this done. So I went from 0 to search and rescue rated pilot in 2 years, which is a lot of flying. So yeah, I was pretty committed to the whole thing.
So let's dive into the reason we've got you here. You've had a number of, you sir have had a number of incidents we'd like to discuss with you. No, in all seriousness, you and I have talked at length over the years about some of these real good teaching moments. And for someone who, you consider yourself kind of just a normal guy, but at the same time, you've got a lot of experience that people like myself have learned a lot from over the years.
Well, we learn a lot from each other, Jim, like, absolutely.
Yeah. We touched on the fact that a lot of your flying is during those nighttime hours. You said, what, about 30% you think are probably night hours over the course of your career?
Yeah, I mean, the whole night thing was the other thing that I saw that pilots were not comfortable doing. And I don't have a problem with the night, so I'm going to learn how to fly at night. And I'm going to do as much flying as I can. I mean, I'm the guy that's arriving back at Anoka at 2 a.m. I did that a lot.
Yeah.
Going out state to go do something, and I'll get the plane at midnight and I'll be back at 2 a.m. No problem. Somewhere north of 30% of my hours, I think like 36% of my hours are nighttime.
So with a lot of your night flying, I know for me, it's always your engine sounds different. You're always fighting your window of circadian rhythm. You're fighting all these adverse things that are, physiological, and then you're also dealing with things that are kind of psychological. I imagine you have some pretty interesting stories that you'd be willing to elaborate with us.
I mean, I just want to start off with kind of like some stuff about flying at night. To me, it has kind of a different rhythm than day. Things are quieter, things are more chill, and things are kind of more relaxed and easygoing at night. At least that's the way I see it. I could see someone being, more nervous or whatnot. But to me, it's not a big deal. There are a few things that I kind of pay attention to. One of the jokes is that I came back to one of my mentors and said, hey, I've been flying at night and whatnot, and I've been having a good time. And he goes, oh yeah. So, does your engine sound rough? I'm like, how did you know? He goes, yeah, just push the mixture in just a little bit, pull it out to where you normally feel it is, and then push it back in and you'll feel better. And that'll take care of it. And it sure did. That scary, like the engine doesn't sound right at night thing, solved. Some other things, I enjoy at night. I fly, with ATC all the time, flight following or whatever. Like I won't go anywhere without them. And it's really nice to have like a quiet night just on the horn with the controller. I've actually had a couple conversations with ATC. I'm up at 8,000 feet in the middle of the night. Hey, how things going? Hey, what's my ground speed? Just kind of kick things off and find out, hey, how's your night? How's mine? Cool. And it's kind of nice to not be part of the craziness that exists kind of during the day. Everybody just, takes it down a notch at night. So that's kind of cool. I think there's a lot of people that they get a little concerned about, what does the ground look like and where do we do emergency landings and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's kind of important in my mind that you kind of understand where you're flying and the conditions that you may be forced to land in. Like I study a lot of, what does the terrain look like along the way and how do I kind of deal with that? But it's not down to, I know for certain there's a field here, or no, for certain there's a field there. Like you just kind of have to have that understanding that it's going to be harder to do if you have an emergency at night. And it certainly has been. All in all, it's quiet, it's relaxing. There's a beautiful night that I had one night where I put the aircraft on autopilot. And the autopilot was, frankly, it's a little bit drunk. So it sits there kind of swinging the aircraft back and forth just very gently. So I turn on the tunes in my headset, I put it on autopilot, and I just sit back and chill as it's lightly snowing outside. So you just kind of get this, kind of light snow in front of you kind of effect. And it's just a beautiful, relaxing time. Navigation at night has been kind of interesting. It's a different skill set entirely. I and my mentor, she and I went up one night with the sole purpose of we are going to navigate by just the lights and maps alone and turn off the GPS at night. And you know what? You can do it. You definitely have to look at the world from a different perspective. But you can totally do it. Once you switch your mindset of, okay, that cluster of lights is a city, that cluster of lights is a city. Okay, that is, a road. Okay, I can see traffic on that. That's probably the freeway, that kind of thing. That black hole is probably a lake. You kind of get a better idea of it. And I thought that's a kind of like a lot of fun to do. It's a new challenge just to kind of see what the world looks like after dark like that.
And you bring up a really good point with that. And it kind of goes to my unpopular aviation opinion, which goes into the point where we rely too much on GPS and all that sort of stuff. That what happens if, God forbid, you lose electricity, alternator goes out. We're trying to conserve batteries. We're in the middle of the black hole. What do we have at our disposal that are tools? Yeah, we have a GPS, but we also have paper charts. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of private pilot. Know your charts, know your paper charts.
Look, again, at night, all sorts of stuff can go weird on me, and it takes a little bit of, I think, a little bit of getting used to flying at night. And I certainly wasn't used to it. I think the third flight after I got my ticket, a buddy and I flew up to Ely to meet some friends and have dinner with them, and then fly home. No problem. We get in the Warrior, about midnight or so. Everything is good. Start the thing up. Taxi out there, get on the runway, spin it up, and take off. And as I rotate, I realize that the end of the runway, the end of the lit runway, is rapidly disappearing underneath the nose of the aircraft. There aren't any other lights out here. And this is the moment I realized that northern Minnesota is one giant swamp devoid of any ground lights whatsoever. And it's a new moon. There's not a moon up or anything like that. And I go from, hey, there's some great runway lighting to pitch black in a moment. And I'm really glad that my instructor had gone through all the IFR kind of stuff with me. Because in that moment was the realization, okay, watch the instruments, take a look outside. Okay, what are we going to do about this? Okay, I kind of thought to myself, okay, this is probably an IFR departure to this thing. If I climb 500 feet a minute, I'll be fine and stay runway heading until I make 3,000 feet. I won't have any towers above that, which I did. Meanwhile, my passenger is sitting there thinking, hey, this is great. We're flying around and whatnot. And I'm just like, clamped onto the yoke, terrified. Again, stuff the fear in the back of the head and fly the plan. But that was pretty much my first encounter with my kind of first real night emergency. And I didn't appear from that black hole for another 45 minutes. So I turned the aircraft on course using GPS, watching my instruments, and flew the damn thing all the way to where lights started to appear, kind of in middle Minnesota. And that was a fantastic experience because I wasn't expecting it. I didn't see it coming, but boy, I kind of know about it now.
And you and I have actually talked about that, obviously. And I appreciated the story as we've discussed it over the years, but I didn't really appreciate what it was until I experienced it myself. And then as you're experiencing, I was up in International Falls on a long cross country coming back at night. I rotate kind of the same thing you say, where the lights start to disappear. And after, I got into the space of fly the airplane and figure out what you're doing, we had a GPS where we couldn't turn down the brightness on the thing. So the person flying with me covers up the GPS with their mitten so that I can't necessarily get blinded by this thing, obviously. Once we were stabilized and flying south, I'm like, oh yeah, this is exactly what he was talking about. I had a lot more respect for that dynamic than I did initially. We're like, yeah, okay, fly the airplane, follow your instruments, trust your instruments, you'll be fine. It's just all of a sudden, oh wow, is it dark?
Well, in my experience of it is like someone spray painted the windscreen with black spray paint.
Absolutely.
Like there's nothing there and it is just you.
Yep. So we talked about the black hole takeoff. You've also had experience with a black hole landing, if I recall correctly.
Oh yeah. Again, everything at night is a little bit different. And northern Minnesota, once again, has its challenges. So one of the airports up there on the North Shore, what was it? Like Silver Bay or something like that. It's kind of nestled in a little bit of a valley, I think, and there's not any lights around it. So, I need to get fuel. So here we are, we're going to do this. And I know that as I'm approaching the airport that, hey, I'm not going to be able to see anything. Driving along on downwind, see the airport, no problem. But it's that turn to base that really gets you, because you make that turn and now everything kind of disappears on you as you kind of come around there. And you're not going to see the runway till kind of, as you're approaching final. And so, I'm just kind of, again, controlling my altitude, watching my instruments, watching a little bit over my shoulder to see, where is the runway showing up. And sure enough, it shows up. And then my wife is with me and, she's having a great time and not even knowing that this is really a difficult landing kind of thing. And then the black hole part of it kind of gets worse in the fact that because there's no lights around it, the runway environment it can look a little bit weird, and it can be hard judging distances because you can look in the book and say, okay, this runway is this amount wide, but those visual references really do a lot for you. So landing, going fine, not a big deal. All lights are on, get over the runway. And that's when my wife yells, watch out. And right in front of me, 2 coyotes run onto the runway. Now, at this moment in time, I know they're 2 coyotes, right? I see a flash of them. I know what they are. But I am feet, if not inches above the runway. I've got way too much inertia to try and turn the thing around. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. I'm going to continue with the landing sequence. I don't want to interrupt anything. This is kind of like, I'm going to take a break for a sec. This is kind of like the idea of, if you drive up north at night, you're going to hit a deer someday. And what's the most dangerous thing to do when in that situation is swerving. Because if you're at speed and you try to swerve to hit the deer, guess what? You're going to wreck your car and probably still hit the deer. Having done that and plowed a deer right through the front of the vehicle once and didn't swerve, we were fine. And this was way, way deep in the woods. So can't do anything. Continue the landing, and sure enough, bang, I hit something. But put it down, pull it off of the runway and shut it down. And so I get out and I look around. I don't see anything. I don't see anything wrong with the aircraft. There's no evidence that anything happened here. Well, I definitely hit something. So I hike over to the runway And sure enough, there's a dead coyote hanging on the runway. And yeah, I hit it with one of the tires on the gear.
Ooh.
And
Tire was fine?
yeah, everything was fine.
Oh.
Just kind of, dumb luck that nothing happened to the aircraft. And I whacked the coyote exactly in the spot where you could and not have any, damage occur. So sure enough, got in fuel and whatnot and had to take off. And I'm like, oh, hold on a minute. I got to go drag the coyote off the runway before I take off. So hike down to the runway, chuck the coyote, off to the side and take off. So yeah, that was one of a few animals I've hit. In fact, I've hit more animals with a plane than I have with my truck, which is kind of a crazy deal. It doesn't get any better for me.
True. I'm here for comedic relief and occasional far aim consultation.
Yeah, there you go.
Fire starter consultation.
Hey, speaking of fire starter, let's talk about the time that you set an aircraft on fire.
No, hold on. I did not set the aircraft on fire. I mean, I threw the switch that probably started the fire, but it wasn't labeled fire or anything. It was labeled, on.
Okay.
Fire on.
At any rate, I'd love to hear the story about it because it's not a nighttime story. It illustrates that things can happen on the ground just because you're not in the area. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't have to possibly deal with a situation. So,
yeah. So to kind of set this whole thing up, this was during a big training exercise, and we needed to roll some aircraft around for some ground training. So we've got this big crowd of people all around that are all the trainees and whatnot. And, they're supposed to be ready to work the ramp and all that kind of stuff. They're absolutely paying attention when we go to start the aircraft. And when I say absolutely paying attention, I mean, really no. My mentor, again, she's hanging out in front of the aircraft, giving me the signaling to start the aircraft and all that kind of stuff. I've got another guy with me over in the right seat. And sure enough, this huge crowd of people is around and whatnot. And they do get out of the way enough to be able to start things up. And, you turn over an engine and most people will eventually move. So I'm not certain what happened. And I still to this day don't know. But I get everything, kind of organized. We're belted in. Everything's good. I go turn everything on, turn on the avionics. And I'm not certain why that was the fire to on switch, but the smoke started billowing out of the radio stack. So what happens is I don't discuss anything with my right seater. He sees the smoke, I see the smoke, and I start shutting everything off. And not only do I shut everything off, I'm quickly shutting everything off. I'm pulling off my headset. I'm pulling, stuff out of the aircraft. I'm unbelting myself, that kind of thing. We're moving really quickly, and both of us are moving fast. Now, this other pilot, she's standing out in front, and she actually didn't see all the smoke start to fill in the cabin. She just saw us moving really quickly. We went from a sedate, let's start the aircraft, to, whoa, holy crap, those guys are moving fast. So she kind of figures, hey, there's something wrong here. And luckily she figured out, oh yeah, this is probably a fire. So she yells to the crowd, go get me a fire extinguisher. And someone goes, oh, do you really need one? Yeah, really absolutely do need one. By the time we pop the doors and climb out of the aircraft, and more kind of fall out, jump out of the aircraft with some of our gear and whatnot, a fire extinguisher did show up. Luckily it was just an electrical fire, and shutting off the master switch and whatnot, took care of the whole thing and had the thing towed back to the hangar for maintenance. So luckily it was not a fire in air. I can say that I have been in an aircraft fire before, but thank God it was on the ground.
That's the one thing that will scare the bejesus out of me flying is an in-flight fire.
So I have a couple questions. You've got this aircraft that's now billowing smoke out of your radio stack, right? From you and your crew members' perspective, is there any communication that you guys have, or do you guys have a rapport built with one another that you kind of know instinctually what the other is going to do to respond to that situation?
Oh yeah, we didn't say anything to each other until we were well clear of the aircraft. We both saw the smoke and we both started moving. And it was a matter of, okay, what's first? Okay, we're going to pull the seatbelts first, right? Mm-hmm. And then what's next is I'm going to unplug my headset because that's easier, just grab the cables than it is to try and pull the damn thing off. The next was, okay, I'm going to try to save some of the mission gear or something like that. So Like, let's grab the GPS, let's grab something else, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I should step back that before we even did all that, clearly, smoke started pouring it out. I turned off the master, kind of checked all of that real quick. So it was kind of like this walk down of, okay, it's important to have the seatbelt off. So let's chuck those off. Okay. All right. We need to have the headsets unplugged. Okay. Those are done. All right. Let's see if we can grab some gear before the thing bursts into flames. Okay, good. And then once we felt like, okay, that's enough stuff. And that's, mind you, that's a matter of seconds. Okay.
Right.
I'm not talking about like a leisurely kind of like, let's unplug a few things. No, it was quick. And we didn't say anything to each other. We didn't say anything to the pilot that was marshaling us. All three of us understood the severity of the situation, which I think was really interestingly counterpointed by the crowd around us, not at all understanding the situation.
Yeah.
So seconds later, we bail out of the aircraft and things are fine, and it's no longer, smoldering a few minutes after that. But it was a very deliberate kind of walk through. Let's get this stuff in order of priority. And again, I kind of come back to that whole like idea of if you lose it, you're not going to make it. Like, you've got to take all the fear, the worries, the freak out and cram it in the box in the back. In order to think your way through these situations. And that's kind of my take on all of these things. When I started off as a pilot, I subscribed to an aviation safety magazine. And you knew it was serious because it came 3-hole punched, so you can put it into a 3-ring binder and save it forever. And I have my 3-ring binder of them somewhere. And I read every article for a couple of years, those first 2 years of flying, because I wanted to learn from everybody else's experiences. The more that I got from them, the more I could synthesize their stuff if I ever ran into trouble. And my God, am I glad that I did.
And one thing I'm kind of picking up on your stories, and I think it's gold for our listeners who maybe don't have a whole lot of time. Maybe they're student pilots, maybe they're aspiring pilots that have not even had their first flight. It's the reality that you have to meter your kind of emotions and be able to think through simple problems. I mean, they're complex problems, but they're simple in the fact that you're creating options for yourself. Always have options. That is my big takeaway.
I agree entirely. There's just something different about flying an aircraft versus like driving on a freeway. Like driving on a freeway, things happen at such, moment in time kind of thing. But in an aircraft, you've got a moment to think about it before it happens. And that's kind of the moment to put your head to it. That's the way I see it anyway.
Can we do one more?
I want to hear about the Canadian honkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want the big one now.
We want to get to it.
All right.
The climax.
We've worked our way up to this, so here we go.
We've gone through the appetizers. We're ready for the big main course.
Okay. So once again at night, Civil Air Patrol is doing kind of an exercise north of the metro, and we've got one mission aircraft going there, and then I've got mine, and I've got a right seater. So I head up to St. Cloud to pick him up. No problem. Moonless night, but it's a nice night. No clouds or anything like that. Probably 9 o'clock, something like that. And the whole point was to go pick up my crewman and then head over to join the mission. We take off out of St. Cloud, and I remember seeing Princeton kind of off in the distance, probably noting like, oh, it's 10 miles to Princeton. We're kind of covering, in the aircraft, what we're going to be doing during the mission, kind of some of our prep. I know he's getting ready some of the gear that we're going to need, that kind of thing. And out of nowhere, that's when the giant bang sound happened. Just this huge, massive bang of metal. And then the world went away, as in I couldn't see out the windscreen at all. Now, okay, I don't know what happened. And I think confusion was more, the moment than anything, as I can't see anything. And I look at the instruments and the instruments look fine. But looking closer at the screen or the windscreen, I can tell like there's some type of black liquid on the windscreen. Oh, I just blew the engine. That's oil. Okay, that's a problem. Okay, so still have tower up. Hey, tower, I need a priority landing at Princeton. I don't know what I was thinking. Like there's moments where, your judgment is a little bit off. And I should have said I need to do an emergency landing. I don't know why I chose priority landing. There's a fight in my head about like, oh, maybe this isn't a real emergency. I don't have to go to the FAA. No, you're going to the FAA. So sure enough, they declared emergency for me. And I tell them, yeah, I think I have an engine problem. And the question I remember coming back to me that really snapped my head was, how many souls on board? Oh, yeah, 2. How much fuel do I have left, that kind of thing. And I kind of explained like, okay, I'm going to try to put it down over at Princeton. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. The engine isn't misbehaving. And I go back to an article I read in the Aviation Safety magazine about a guy that blew a rod in his engine up at altitude in cruise. And his comment on the whole thing was that the engine didn't shut down until he touched the controls for the engine. So it kept running as long as he didn't touch, the throttle or anything. I'm like, okay, the engine has blown up. It is running right now, but I'm not going to touch it. It's either going to be on or off. So I'm going to get to the airport environment, and I'm going to manage the plane from there. But we're staying in cruise the entire time, like just not going to touch it. So this is definitely one of those moments. And this is the height of all of my incidents to date is again, you've got that fear of what the hell is going to happen to you and all that kind of stuff. And you really got to cram it in the back there. But it's definitely present. But I can see Princeton ahead of me. It's like 8 miles out and I'm moving towards it. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with the aircraft. I don't have any understanding of what's gone wrong. I can't see in front of me except for a little patch down kind of near the windscreen, near the glare shield. So I'm going to have to look through that to land the aircraft. I don't see anything else. I look around, nothing else is wrong. All the instruments stay in the green and whatnot, but I am solely focused on what I'm doing. The radio has disappeared to me. Now that I've communicated my intentions to the tower, and they know what's going on, there's traffic on the radio, but I am solely focused on flying the plane. Little do I know that at that point in time, Tower is now taking every aircraft in the sector and piling them on top of me because they're expecting me to drop it into the ground somewhere. I had no idea that this was happening, but there's a lot of aircraft heading towards me at that moment. So as I approach the airfield, I turn the radio to CTAF for the field. And this is an odd moment because I don't want to have a conversation about I need to do an emergency landing. So I make the conscious decision in my head that I'm going to let a little bit of the fear out. Like I'm going to control it, but I'm going to let some of the fear out of my head so that when I say I am executing an emergency landing at Princeton, please clear the field immediately, that anybody listening will hear that touch of fear and not be like, hey, I'm on the field, I need to do something, blah, blah, blah. Like they will get the hell out of the way. I don't know if this was a good choice or not, but I clamped back down on the fear because, again, I could not listen to the radio. As far as I'm concerned, the airfield is mine and I'm taking it. I'm comforted as I get close that my favorite maneuver during training was power off 180s. I just love them. They're just a fantastic, fun thing. And you get to manage a whole bunch of stuff about aircraft energy and that kind of thing. And so I feel that if I can get the aircraft to the field, I can pull out the engine and I'll make it. Okay, cool. I get into the pattern. I've still got the thing like in cruise. And so I start carefully pulling the engine back and I encounter as I turn to base and final, just a wicked crosswind. And it's close to, max crosswind for a 172. And I fight the thing all the way to the ground. But I remember that moment where I pull the engine all the way out to execute the landing and it doesn't die on me. And I put it on the ground. And sure enough, I roll it out and I come to a stop and I'm like, okay, engine is still running. Like I can barely see the runway environment and the taxi lights and whatnot through the little, chunk I can see through. So let's at least get it off the runway so I can have my emergency and not screw up the runway. So I drive over to the ramp and turn it off and we both get out of the aircraft. And that's when above me is the sound of a helicopter, loud 4-blade helicopter, just, right above us. And sure enough, out of nowhere, just a few hundred feet away, the helicopter is slowly hovering down. And then like a movie, a searchlight pops on and plays over the field back and forth until it eventually settles on the both of us as the helicopter is landing. And then moments later, I see a guy in a jumpsuit and a helmet running towards me, backlit by the spotlight. And so we start heading towards him. And now that I have all this light, I can turn around and look at the 172. And wow, the windscreen isn't black, it's red and feathers. And there's a giant hole through the leading edge of the right wing. And the tip of the right wing is missing. It looks like I hit birds of some kind, something big. I couldn't even process it at that moment. But sure enough, this guy in the flight suit and the helmet runs up to us. Are you guys okay? We were yelling over the rotor wash of the helicopter. And we're like, yeah, we're okay. I think it was a bird strike, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, he's going to fly over there and why don't you come back to the hangar with us? So we abandon the aircraft and hike down to this hangar where this helicopter was stationed. And it's like a life flight helicopter, right? So these guys are medics. I do recall okay, I got to call tower and tell them I made it on the ground okay, so they can do whatever they need to do. So I dig my phone out of the aircraft and I find the number for the tower and I call those guys up and they're like, okay, that's great, fantastic. We'll call everybody off. And so everybody, kind of went on their way. Now I'm pretty jacked up at this point, a lot of adrenaline running, that kind of thing. So I'm sitting over in the ready room for the air ambulance crew, and I'm, a little bit of shakes and whatnot. That's pretty intense stuff. And I'm letting now all the fears kind of finally I'm on the ground and everything is okay and whatnot. And I can kind of let it come out of its box. And I just remember them, I've got the shakes and whatnot. They're like, hey, you want a cup of coffee? Here, have a cup of coffee. Let's have some caffeine on top of your adrenaline. That sounds fantastic. So I call my wife, which, those kinds of phone calls are really strange because the first thing you say is, I'm okay, honey. She has no idea what's happened, right? But I'm just telling her I'm okay. And I briefly explain it, to her what happened and whatnot. Then immediately after that, I call the mechanic for the aircraft and say, hey, look, I think this was a bird strike. I don't really know what happened. Someone's going to have to come up and take a look at the aircraft. I have no idea. And then my next call was to the other aircraft that was in the mission. I just told the guy, look, you have a van there for everybody. I want you to dump your crew in the van and come over and pick us up in Princeton because we still need to fly home. So he said, sure, we'll take care of that. And then out of nowhere, my phone rings. Now, mind you, this is 30, 45 minutes since I declared an emergency, right? It's the FAA. They have my cell phone number. And they're demanding, now this is on a Friday, right? And they're demanding you shall show up, no option. You shall show up at the FSDO office at 8:30 Monday morning. No, hey, let's schedule a time for you to come down. No, you will show up. This is the time. This is the place. I'm like, yes, sir. Shall be done. And sure enough, walked back out in the field after our other pilot showed up and got into his aircraft. And, I kind of felt at the time, I wonder if I should be scared of flying again because of this. No, let's get the hell out of here. Let's go home. So it was great getting on board another plane immediately after this big event kind of thing. Monday morning, I went down to the FSDO's office and I was met with a giant stack of paper, a foot deep, right? And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll get started. And the guy says, okay, let's walk through what happened. I'm like, okay, this is what happened, blah, 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 blah. And, it looks like we hit 3 waterfowl or something, 3 birds. And he goes, wait, this was a bird strike? Yeah. Oh, hold on. I'll be right back. And he grabs the giant stack of paper. He comes back with a different giant stack of paper and says, okay, this is no big deal. You did a precautionary landing. We're all good, but you still got to spend the rest of the day filling out paperwork, which I did. That was pretty straightforward. They were all cool with me the moment they figured out it wasn't an engine problem, that it was a bird strike. So that's all right. A few days later, I get a call from the mechanic who says that, yeah, I need you to fly the aircraft home. I drove up there. I applied duct tape to it, and it's all set to go. and sure enough, so I get the guy that flew me and my crewman back. I get him to grab a cap aircraft, and we fly up there. for me to pick up the aircraft and drive it back to maintenance. And sure enough, like he's applied some duct tape in some strategic spots, but mostly the aircraft, including the windscreen, is still covered in blood and guts and all this kind of stuff. And we end up spending a whole bunch of time like scraping all the guts off the windscreen to be able to fly it back to Anoka. And yeah, to this day, that aircraft has like a patch on the leading edge of the right wing where it turns out that 3 geese went into it, that the maintenance guy just kind of patched the plane up, and it's still flying today.
Wow.
It's a bad joke. Like, was that a like you catch it, you clean it scenario?
Normally that'd be okay for me, but maybe not this time.
That's different.
So yeah, that's the big story. I've had like a number of incidents, and that's the top one. And yeah, that was a lot of like thinking through the problem, and I'm really glad that I had read all the stuff before. That saved my life. Reading all the stuff before and realizing, okay, like, let's think through this thing. I'll use this guy's, his example as something to guide me, which, even though it wasn't the same situation, I didn't blow up the engine at all, right? But just simply knowing that, hey, someone's been here before and this is what they did and they lived. Okay, well, that takes the fear down a little bit. Like I can operate through that because now I have a plan and I got a procedure and I can execute it. And the whole thing was, even though there's like this tremendous amount of fear in the back of your head, like the whole thing was something that, you just work the steps of the problem and work your way through it. Like if I can make it to the airport environment, I can power off 180 it. Okay, cool. If I can, slow the aircraft down, then I can do a normal landing kind of thing. Like, okay, great. All right. If I can get over the runway, I can pull the power out all the way. Fantastic. We made it kind of thing. And it was just, solving the problem kind of incrementally.
I gotta hand it to you. That's one hell of a story.
Wow.
It goes into that space of always learning in aviation, and your license to learn type of thing, and learning from each other and hearing those stories from each other, and taking that and applying it. Where not only are we trying to do that through your stories here, but that's kind of the same principle that you were using to get yourself well versed in all these different aviation scenarios you could wind up in. And now you end up in one and you fall back to that training.
Yeah, I find the whole thing kind of funny because I talk about this whole thing. I tell the story of this, and I have a certain sense of like, yeah, I made it kind of thing. Like, yeah, this is a cool story kind of thing. But to a whole section of the population, this is like, I will never fly with this guy, and this guy is scary, and what the hell are you doing kind of thing. So I think there's 2 different ways you could look at it, but my take on it is, yeah, this was a success. This turned out well. Well, I just hope that stories like the ones I have, like the one that helped me in my time of need, like I'm hoping like maybe this helps someone else in their time of need kind of thing. Like,
indeed.
We're all pilots together, and like we all face, pretty intense challenges at times. That's what flying is. And, if you've got something in the back of your head that someone else, kind of walked you through, then hopefully that helps you out when you need it.
So to round out our experience with our guests, we like to give you the option of how you're going to end this. You have one of 2 choices. You can either face a series of ridiculous trivia questions from us, or you may share with us your aviation unpopular opinion. It's really our podcast version of Truth or Dare. And how did you put it last time, Maddie?
Yeah, if you're cool, you pick the dare, and that's the unpopular opinion.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, like, I'll take the hard one of, like, an unpopular opinion, but, like, everyone is kind of situational. So, it'll be popular with some people, it'll be unpopular with others.
That's the beauty of it.
I guess maybe just an inflammatory opinion, maybe? like GPSs are dumb, kind of, like,
okay,
sure, that's not actually true.
No, I'm good. No, I got one. Absolutely got one. Yeah, absolutely. Look. Like 90% of pilots that I hear on the air are awful on the radio. Learn to use the radio and learn how to talk to ATC for once in your life. ATC will not be cool with you if you're like, hey, I was just wondering if I could whatever. Like, they're not going to let you drive over the top of Minneapolis with that kind of thing. Know what you want to do. Explain it well, succinctly, and carefully to the controller, and guess what? You'll get what you want. That's my
absolutely.
I like
That's
it.
beautiful. That's almost poetic.
Well, I think that you see that on both sides of the fence. If you don't go and experience an uncontrolled airport, you go into that environment and you're tripping over your words there. That was my experience, I guess. I didn't experience as much uncontrolled airspace as I probably should have. I did all my flight training at a towered airport. So I got really used to talking to ATC. I fly up the road to Cambridge and I sound like a bumbling idiot.
Go to other airports that you're not familiar with. Go to uncontrolled airports. If you know you're bad at it, go do it a bunch of times and you won't be bad at it anymore.
Well,
Hopefully.
can I add on to my opinion real quick?
Please
No, you
ask.
only get one chance at opinions. So
You get one opinion on this podcast.
okay,
No, it's an add-on.
I'll allow
It's
it.
not. It,
Oh, an
it's just
add-on.
an
Okay.
extension.
Okay.
I'll allow it.
If you are a Super Cub driver,
Oh,
have a
God.
radio. Just have a radio and use it, okay? I've been cut off in the pattern by Super Cub drivers by like a dozen times. Have a radio. They're not expensive. They run on batteries. It's easy. There.
And how many pilots have, I guess, any of us talked to that have said the exact same thing? Well, Lion, I sincerely appreciate the time and you coming to chat with us about all of your adventures in aviation. I think it's been eye-opening for all of us.
Oh, thanks a lot. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm very appreciative. I mean, I've heard your stories and I still like hearing them again. But I think all these stories can be beneficial to somebody. And even if we impact only one or two people through, the stories that we share, that could be a very big difference for that one or two people that are impacted down the road.
One's enough.
Absolutely.
If you save a life, that's enough.
Yep.
Save
one's
just
enough.
one life.
Well, it's been fantastic meeting you guys, and I've had a good time.
Yeah, it's been really fun.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
I think this was a really great conversation with Lion, and just his experiences, I think, are great learning experiences for everybody.
I've learned a lot.
You're right when you said, Jim, that it really tests his mettle. Being a good pilot, just beating around a pattern, is not what you're going to want for a very proficient pilot. You want somebody that's been in the thick of it, that's been able to compartmentalize fear and just get the job done. I think it speaks volumes to his character, his experience, and his ability to share that knowledge with all of our listeners. So great conversation. We hope that everybody else enjoyed it. What do we got going on for next episode, Jim?
On our next episode, we will be featuring Piper brand ambassador Elle Taylor. She is a student at Minnesota State University in Mankato, working on her Bachelor's of Science degree in aviation, and she's also one of the brand new brand ambassadors for Piper Aircraft. We look forward to talking to her, learning about what Piper Aircraft brand ambassador is all about, as well as some of her activities on social media such as Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
So if you enjoyed this conversation and our previous content, you can go ahead and visit us on our Facebook page, Instagram, and YouTube, or you can drop us a line at flymidwestpodcast@gmail.com.
Oh, and while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. Hit the like button. Make sure to comment for the engagement and so we can hear how we're doing and what you'd like to see next. And hit that bell if you're on YouTube.
Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Until next time, see ya.
See ya.
See ya.
Chef 536, contact Minneapolis Center 132.35 today.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Flying Midwest podcast. Until next time, podcast service terminated, squawk VFR, frequency change approved. Good day.
Do you ever just sit there thinking, man, I really want somebody to laugh at? Well, I have the moment for you. It's time for the bloopers.
Back to you guys.
Oh boy. Back to thanks, Trevor.
Fine.
I'm trying to help you so you don't sound like an idiot.
I don't. How long have we been doing this now? I don't care that I sound like an idiot. I sound like an idiot on this podcast every single episode.
We all do, but
If you're a fan of Cessna, you might I don't know where I was going with that.
I'm a fan of Cessnas.
Right. I'm not.
sticking with the theme of Minnesota. Sorry, I had to.
No, you didn't.
That was bad. Yeah. Your dad's coming out really hard right now.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad.
Dad!
I bet when you stand up from that chair when you're done recording this, you go, well, I suppose.
He's got to slap his knees and like, boop. I do that to my dog all the time. She hates it, but I do it anyway.
Good thing you do it all the time then.
Well, that was the news. Let's hop over to Jim for some events and this day in aviation history.
Thanks, Trevor.
That was good.
At my expense, as always.
Well, you started it.
I know.
I looked down for 1 second and you children quit touching each other. Keep your hands to yourself. I don't always know what I'm talking about.
Well, you're the resident expert, so we trust you.
How have we not learned this? There's a lot of times I really don't know what I'm talking about.
When we jump into emergencies, Valerie, what do you
think about that?
Of all the things I've been called, Mallory is not one of them.
I'm going to try this
again. This is a real podcast, right?
No.
I don't know how we do it, but yes.
At the end, it turns into one, but it takes about 7 hours, I think. So our next episode, we are going to be
picturing.
We'll be fixing to have.
So you feel it? You feeling me? Are we on the same wavelength?
I'm feeling you.